A lot different this week than they were last week, of course. And I want to lay out what happened in the election and what we can expect going forward. And I want you to remember, first of all, that everything is very much in flux. So the first thing to remember and to have, front and center, put it in a post-it note somewhere, is that for all that Trump and his loyalists are saying he has a mandate and that he won in a landslide, that is not true. It looks at the end of the day as if his majority is going to be less than a percentage point. It's the lowest number of people. It's the least amount by which somebody has won the popular vote since at least 1968. And it does not mean that all of a sudden there has been a huge change in the American electorate or in the way people think about things or anything. It simply means that the way the cards fell last Tuesday, Donald Trump is in line to be the next president of the United States. Now, people have asked how and why that happened, and I think there are of course, we're going to wait and we're going to see what the numbers look like, because that's the only way you can really see who was voting. But one of the things that I would like to point out is that since the 2021 election, there have been a number of voter suppression laws put in place across the country, and those should not be discounted. I mean, nobody has factored in yet how big a difference they made. Usually when you see historically a big drop off in voting, it's because there have been new laws that went in place. We don't know, but I think that's something that you need to look at. The other thing that that I'm going to talk about in just a minute is how the political landscape has changed. And but the one thing I want to say, in addition to the idea that Trump did not win by a landslide, is you really must look at the down ballot races, because in the down ballot races, the causes that are being called progressive, but that I would call, honestly, I'd call conservative, but at least they're centrist ideas, passed. So a number of states protected the right to abortion in their state constitutions. I think it was 8, although I don't remember off the top of my head. Florida tried to, but it only had 57%, and the Republicans in Florida have adjusted their system so that you need to have 60% to get anything added to the Constitution. That's quite a lot. It's hard to get 60% for anything. The people enshrined in their laws higher minimum wages, all sorts of things that would be considered progressive in this era, but as I say, are to the right of Dwight Eisenhower, who was a Republican president in the 1950s. So the point of this election remains the way it has always been, that the American people would like a government that responds to its interests. They want abortion rights protected. They want common sense gun safety legislation. They want higher minimum wages. They want government regulation. They want higher taxes on higher earners. They want the programs that the Democrats are putting in place, and they are voting for them in the states. Where they are not voting for them is at the top of the ticket. And that, I think, says something very important about where we are in this moment. There, in a lot of ways. But first of all, there was an extraordinary amount of disinformation around this election. And not only the kind of disinformation that I've talked about before, but as people said who were watching the way the news media was working, it is possible to believe that you are an informed American citizen and not have any idea of what is happening. So one of the things that came out after the election, actually it came out a little bit before the election, but it really got traction after the election, was that people who were accurately informed about the economy, immigration, and abortion rights voted Democratic. People who were not voted Republican. And similarly, people who got their newspapers went 3-1 for Democrats. People who got their news from right-wing media went 2-1 for Trump. And that disinformation really, really mattered in this campaign, not least because apparently a lot of young men have been radicalized by YouTube, by Reddit. And where's the other place they get their news? YouTube, Reddit, and X, which of course Elon Musk bought. Now, that's a really important thing to think about, that disinformation and where it comes from, because while it is certainly part of the right-wing ecosystem in the United States and has been since talk radio in the 1980s, since it began in the mid 1980s. And everybody always talks about the fairness doctrine. And yes, the fairness doctrine did insist that in order to get a broadcast license, you had to present both sides of a story and you had to have fact-based argument. But they tend to forget that the fairness doctrine went out of effect at about the same time we got the rise of cable. And you actually don't, like, I don't need a broadcast license to do what I'm doing here. So bringing back the fairness doctrine in the incarnation in which it was in the 1980s is simply not going to help in an era of cable news, and the era of people being able to broadcast on their own. So America has its homegrown disinformation for sure, and it always has, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But we have been flooded with disinformation from foreign actors as well since 2015, and the big actors in that are Russia, China, and Iran. And the reason that matters, aside from the fact it has affected our domestic politics, is that if there is one takeaway from this election, and I think there is this one for sure, the United States has just abdicated its role as a leader in world affairs. And that it is no longer going to protect democracies. It is no longer trying to protect human rights. We gave that up. And that is the beginning of a new era in global politics. And that, that's really heartbreaking. I mean, to me, anyway.